Hello. This video is about some Charlton romance comics that I picked up this last month, and I was never really into them that much until the last year or two, and I've discovered there's some fairly interesting artists and aspects to them. So I'm dedicating this video to Charlton romance. This is one of my earliest ones. Sue and Sally Smith, Flying Nurses. It's got art by Dick Giordano, and he also did the cover. This is Just Married, number 54 from 1967. It's also got a Dick Giordano cover. And this is Secrets of Young Brides from 1964. It's also got a Dick Giordano cover. From 1972, this is Sweethearts, number 129. It's got a cover by Gustavo, Trigo. And this is Love Diary, number 71 from 1971. I'm not sure who did the cover of this. This is an interesting book, Secret Romance, from 1975. It's got a cover by Demetrio Sanchez Garcia, and there's also a story by him inside. This is Art Capello, who's semi-interesting. He's not bad. That's Alicia. But this is Dimitri Sanchez Garcia. As you can see, his art's kind of interesting. Illustrative. Well, here's his signature, Demetrio. Just gonna show you his artwork really quick. I'm not gonna go into the story too much. And I always have these fun ads for photographs. I dig his artwork. I like the little little decorations in the background. Alex Toth did a lot of that in his DC work. To be careful, these things are fragile. And they go from the party, the kiss. How about a little scuba diving? That was not unusual in a Charlton comic. A little more kissing. And they fly off to live happily ever after. The end. This is an interesting issue. I Love You from 1975. It's an Art Capello cover. Capello, I'm sorry. I was get his name wrong. This first story is by Enrico Nito, who I think is really a cool artist. I like, his little flourishes here. Charlton didn't pay a whole lot, so the artists had to move fast when they were working on them. I like the kind of psychedelic effects here. The birds in the cages, so cool. And of course they make it out to the beach. A little kissing, a little background there. That's awesome. That's Enrique Nito. Can't have a romance book without a few tears. And I just really dig the decorations that he uses. This is another story by Demetrio Sanchez Gomez. I kind of dig his work. A lot of work goes into that hair. That's kind of the way I spot his work. Speaking of hair, get yourself a nice wig for $6.99, stretch wig. Like the cool clothing from the time. This is 1975. It'll put me in high school during these times. Uh-oh, things are getting dark. That guy's up for no good. So there has to be the little savior scene. Oh no, you're so strong. All right, the end with the big kiss. And finally in this issue is an Art Capello story. He's very simple, but he's a good storyteller, I think. Don't want to go into too much detail. You can kind of make out what's going on. You don't have to read the words too much. He kind of lays it out. A little office problem there. It was a different time. A lot of romance in the office. Oh, God. I don't know. I just like his artwork. These Charlton books just seem more interesting than the Marvels. Certainly the Marvels of the time. I mean, no knock on John Buscema or John Romita, but these just seem to be more spontaneous and interesting. This issue of Teen Confessions from 1974, or 3 or 4. It's got an Art Capello cover. Here's a typical Nicholas Ink by Alicea cover, or a story. The girl next door trying to get this square to go to the beach with her, but he kind of blows her off. She's real popular, even though she wears glasses. And but she can't stop thinking about the nerd who blew her off. So she kind of tricks him into kissing her. And she's kind of bothered that she had to trick him. That she had to figure out a way to get her to kiss him again, which would make him think it's his idea. Oh, man, the plotting that those women go through. So she decides to go to meet him at the library. And so she says, I have a history of paper to do. So he's trying to help her out. And she's like, I can't concentrate. And he's like, oh, I can't concentrate either. And so they live happily ever after. Not bad, but, not that inspiring either. This is a Susan Day pinup by Tony Tallarico. So cool. This story is an early work by Joe Staton. Someday I'll find you. This girl just turned 17. She's kind of a sexy little girl, and they're in Alaska. with her parents and this older friend, and she wishes that she were 5 years older because she thinks he's pretty cool. But her parents let her go sailing with them. It really seems like kind of a creepy story, but these days you know where it would go. But no, he's a gentleman. Even though she's really hot for him, he just kind of holds her off. And then she's bored, and he says, well, there's a rock band playing at the cave down by the beach. And her parents go, oh, we don't want to go that. You can take her. So they go, and they're listening to this rock band, and the young guy comes up and asks her to dance. And so she goes to dance with him. And he takes her outside and makes a move on her. And the guy, I forget his name, Mr. Johnson or something, he comes out, chases the guy away. And then from then on, they go scuba diving. A lot of diving in these Charlton comics. And she fakes like she's in trouble. And he grabs her and takes her out. And he's like, oh, I know how to wake her up. Fistful of seaweed in her face. That'll do it. Oh, no. He says, well, it's too bad you're so young. I'm grown up and you know it. Not quite, Naomi. Hope we meet again when you're older. So finally they have to say goodbye. And she kisses him goodbye. And the next day he's gone and she's all shook up. But he left her a note saying, well, I have to go to Turkey, but when I'll be back in 5 years, and if you still like me, maybe we can get together. That's nice work by Joe Staton. Now, this book is by Leo Duranona. Scratch and Claws. I'll just go through the art here really quick. The girl's a folk singer, and everyone wants to party with her, but she's just like, she wants to be on her own. So she has him drop her off at a hotel, and she's like, oh, your accountant's here. Oh, okay, I've been waiting for him. She gets to her room. Hey, you're not my accountant. He says, oh, he's my uncle, and he's really sick in the hospital. And she's like, oh, you're trying to trick me. She kicks him out, and then she changes her mind and runs down and says, hey, wait a minute. So they get together, and she decides he's not half bad. Her name is Scratch that she goes by, and his name is Claws. And she says, hey, Scratch and Claws, we're like a circus act. So she takes her on a picnic, and they have some fun. And then on the way back, she goes, oh, we've got to get back in time for your concert. So they're driving. I haven't got to the picnic yet. Got ahead of myself there. It's kind of a nice decorative stuff. Remember, these guys are only getting like about $15 a page. So some of this work is pretty impressive if you think in those terms. So he makes a move on her, and she makes a move on him. And they go waiting, and then it's time to get back to the concert. So they go past the merry-go-round, and she's like, oh, I need to get on the merry-go-round. I've never been on one before. He's like, okay, just one ride. So he tells her, go for the brass wing. And he says, oh man, next time we'll make it a diamond one. Oh, and then some of her fans see her, and she's with the square, so they're gonna shake him up. But no, he does the savior routine, and she tells him her real name. Isn't it a gas? Next we have Teenage Love number 93 from 1973 with a cover by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. And there's also a story. It was a thing with Charlton. They would have a cover, and then the inside would be, usually the last story would be by the same artist, and it would have the same splash page. I guess they only had to pay him draw it once and use it twice. Never forget me, but Johnny Love. This guy, Johnny Love, runs into this girl at the beach, and he's driving away in his motorcycle, and she almost runs him over. And he's like, "Oh, who's that guy? I'm gonna find out." Later, he crashes. He goes, "Oh, I gotta pull that guy out. Hey, it's a chick." She's like, "Oh, you gotta help me. These guys are after me." Okay, well, I gotta get my purse. Oh no, so he grabs her purse and the car blows up. So let's get out of here. These guys are trying to kill me. So they took off down this road. They're in Mexico and they're heading for the border. And the road's out and these guys are chasing him. So he takes off down the bumpy road where the car can't follow him, and they're shooting at him. It's like, oh shit. So she goes, "Oh, I'm hungry. Can you get me something to eat?" And he says, "Oh, I'll see what they got here." So she's messing with his motorcycle while he's getting the food. And he's like, she's up to something. So they get on a motorcycle and they head for the border. They get across, and there's somebody waiting for them. Oh, and they chase them, and they tell them to pull over. So he like brakes, and the car goes past him, and he cuts behind him and goes off into the desert. So she's like, "Oh, well, we'll get away now." And he's like, "No, we better call the cops. They're trying to kill us." So the girl doesn't want to see the cops, but he's like, "Well, I don't know why they were trying to kill me, but look at my gas tank. She stuck something in there." And it turns out she was smuggling diamonds. And so uncharacteristically, they let him go and arrest the girl. Yes, sir, it sure was. The next artist I want to talk about is Luis Avila. He did this cover, "I'll Be a Modern Wife." And again, it's the splash page. I'll just go through the art real fast. I'm not going to talk too much about the story. You can kind of figure out modern wife. Oh no. I guess they got these Spanish or Mexican artists. I don't know where they come from, but I think their art is really interesting. Again, for the rates they were working at, I guess that was decent money for some people back in those days, in the 70s. But it was really not a lot that they were getting paid. And they really put some work into these pages. And what's going to happen? Is there going to be a kiss at the end? Of course, it's a Charlton romance. There's got to be a kiss at the end. This is the last book I'm going to go into in detail. It's got a cover by Nestor Oliveira. I'm not that familiar with his work. And this is by a guy who signs his work, Ennio, The Defiant Ones. Seems to be a pretty decent artist. At this time, Charlton didn't really give that many credits, but sometimes the artists would sneak their signature in there. I don't know, I kind of dig this guy's work. Ennio, Seems like Langosino or something like that. Sorry for this erratic camera work. I'm no pro, that's for sure. But I hope you're getting an idea of why I enjoy these books so much. Most of these stories are written by Joe Gill, who was a very prolific writer for Charlton. And uncharacteristically, this doesn't end up with a kiss, but with tears. And her father with his pipe saying, "Tut, tut." I got all these books in the last few months, I guess since January, in about 3 different lots. This is Luis Avila. This next cover is awesome, by Luis Nito. Isn't that great? And I managed to pick these up for about just a little under $4 each, all in, counting tax and shipping. That's Art Capello. More Art Capello. This one I picked up at a comic shop. I paid $10 for it. Phew. That's why I turned to eBay on these lots. Hollywood Romances, Empty Kisses from the Heart. That's by Don Sherwood, I think. No idea who did that cover. 1969. This is Love Diary from 1975 with an Art Capello cover. Teen Confession, also from 1975 with a Frank Boyle cover. Teen Confessions from 1974. That's, I forget that guy's name. And from 1975, this is For Lovers Only, an Art Capello cover. And finally, this is A Secret Romance. This one I picked up at a comic shop for $1.50. So I guess that balances out. It's a little bit beat up. It's an Art Capello cover. Well, that's my little trip down Charlton Romance Comics. If you enjoyed it, like it, give me a follow and subscribe. So I'll see you next time. As an addendum, I just got this package in the mail. This is Love Diary. These are earlier ones from the 60s, I think. Got Teen Confessions. Romantic Story. Teenage Love, and Just Married. Fun stuff. I'd love to hear your comments, and have a good one. Hello. This is a video about an artist who signs his work A. Martinez for Charlton Comics, and I believe his real name is Julio Cesar Medrano, an Argentinian artist of some note, although I couldn't find very much information about him other than pictures of a lot of his work. This first story is called Tonight, My Darling. Most of his work is inked by someone else. I suspect that this one might be inked by himself, but I can't say for sure. typical romance story, boy meets girl. Martinez is big on figures, faces. His backgrounds are usually kind of limited, but he's very good at drawing the pretty girls. Ted, you know how I feel about you. Of course, Carol. This girl really wants him to say those 3 little words that he's resisting. So finally she gets frustrated and says, that's it, you know, let me out. And he's like, oh, well, I should have brought a lawyer around and negotiate this date. And she's like, take me home. And he's like, well, this date, I thought we had something going, baby, but it turned out to be a long conversation. Screech. So this is where you get off, baby. This is the end of the line. I know it. So she's going in, and he comes to her and says, I know you like me, but I'm just not ready to commit now. Why aren't you? I love you. I don't know why you. He's like, I just don't want to. You were asking for me to do something that I'm just not ready to commit to yet. Oh, how bad, how could I have done that? Kiss me goodnight. She's like, he'll tell me someday, just not tonight. This next story, also by A. Martinez, which he also did this cover, as he did the last cover. The story is called Love and Learn. It's a story of this photographer and a model, and he's doing a photo shoot. And all of a sudden this guy comes in, Gary, he's a movie star. And the girl, the model, her name's Dory, so they're introduced, and he's there to have publicity photos taken. Oh, I didn't mention, this is inked by Jean Elier. I think he's also an Argentinian artist, but I have to do more research. I forgot I should have done that before I made this video. So Gary and Dory take off, and the photographer is like, well, that blows my shooting schedule. He says, don't worry, I'll bring you a hamburger. So they start going out, and everywhere they go, people are like, oh, that's him. He's a movie star. I'm going to get his autograph. Yeah, I'm sure I've seen her in the movies too. So at first she's really digging it. The crowds of people coming wanting autographs. So he's wanting to see her every day. Then one day he's like, oh, I was looking for Gary. It's his manager. I forgot to mention him. So Dory's like, well, you know, what makes you think he's here? He's like, well, I don't know. I just thought I'd try it. Goodbye, she says. So this is a nice little montage here of what's going on. They're going out, and all around them is paparazzi, and they're going to all these fancy places. But she's getting a little down, And the manager comes up and says, "Hey, Dory, what's the matter? Big problems?" "Oh, I like going out with Gary, but there's always a crowd." That's his style. He likes crowds. Me, I'm more into a one-on-one relationship. And then Gary comes out, "Hey there, stealing my girl, Pete. Remember, as my agent, you only share 10%. So he takes her to a shooting set. He takes her out, and then the next day, they're at a shooting session, and with the original photographer, and he's like, "Let's do some action scenes." And she trips over something, and she hurts herself. "Oh, it hurts. It's really swollen. Let's call the doctor." Good camera art there. So she's convalescing with a cast on her leg, and so she can't go out, so she's not seeing Gary much. And the photographer's visiting, seeing how she's doing, and he finds out, that Gary's been sending. She hasn't come, but he's been sending roses every day. So, he's getting ready to go. There's someone at the door, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll let him in. I'm on my way out anyway." "Gary? No, it's Pete. I dropped in to see what I could do for you. I wish you could get me out of this room." And he goes, "Oh, that's easy." And he picks her up and takes her out, and so let's go for a drive. And she's like, "Oh, this wind feels good in my hair," or whatever. And so they go somewhere, and they're getting something to eat, and Gary comes up with another chick, and he's like, "Dory, where have you been hiding the past few weeks?" "Oh, I've been away, Gary, far away." "Welcome home, Dory. Let's have dinner tomorrow night." "Sorry, I'll be busy tomorrow night and every day this week." She's like, "Oh, Pete, how could I have been so stupid?" "Yeah, he's that kind. He's, that kind. But, and you, Pete, I love you, Dory." The end. Okay, this issue is Teen Confessions. Has a Martinez cover and 2 stories. Also both inked by Jean Eliar. And I looked her up, and it turns out she's a female born in Spain. I couldn't find much information other than that about her, though, other than a few credits. This story is The Beautiful Man Trap. Nice car. So it's a rich girl, poor boy kind of story. And she's trying to get his attention. And she finds out he likes this car, so she's like, "Let's go in half and half. I can afford $400, and you got $400." So they decide to buy it together, but he's not biting on her romance routine. So they buy the car, and he spends all his time trying to fix it up, and he gets it running really good. And she's like, "Well, at least he's talking to me now." "Before this is over, Chris, at least you'll notice me." So she takes off her overalls and puts on her dress, gets all dolled up. So this other guy makes a play for her, and he's like, "Hey, baby, let me drive the car." And she's like, "No way." And he smashes the car. So the guy comes up and says, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Well, what about the car?" And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We can always get another car." The end. So as the cover referred to Olympics, here we have fun and games time. The splash, of course, based on the cover. A. Martinez and Jean Eliar, 1972. So she's the athlete. She's practicing for the Olympics. I don't remember this story very well, but the artwork's nice. Grace Edmonds finished second. What a surprise. Guy, I did it. I'm going to Japan. Terrific, Grace. Guy helped me a lot. He encouraged me. Those times I nearly gave up. So she's also a skier. Or he's a skier. I don't know which. So it's off to Japan. Talk, talk, talk. And we all know what goes on at the Olympic Village. And of course, another athlete makes a play for her. So he takes her out, and Carl's method of communication doesn't require words. So her boyfriend comes along. "Oh, well, I'm sorry. He's super cool." And he's like, well, I shouldn't have wigged out a guy. I think he was just trying to help. I don't know what. But they sure signed a lot. They made up for no credits by signing every other page. So then the skating comes up. And got some skiing action. Actually, I didn't concentrate too much on that. It's interesting artwork. Be careful, guy. And he falls. I hope he isn't hurt. Just run along and make all the girls happy. I'm going to sit up with a sick friend. And so, the guy's up on his crutches, and you just won the gold medal as the loveliest man at the Sapporo Winter Olympics, guy. Men that to read the most in love competition. I'll accept that medal, Grace. The end. In beautiful Japan. Next we have in Just Married Comics, it's a serial. This is episode 2 by drawn by A. Martinez, David and Eileen. And this one is inked by Tony Zuniga. Is that Tony DeZuniga? I don't know, but it's definitely nice looking inking on this. So the story is David's Jewish and Eileen is Catholic, Irish Catholic, and they get married and their families are like upset. I guess they go to City Hall and they get married and they're on their honeymoon and they just don't want it to ever end. But he's like, come on, we've got to go back to town. I got to go to work. So they drive back to the city and she's like, he's like, well, you know, I think that we can get, if we budget, we can get by on my salary. And she's like, well, I'd rather work, you know, as long as I can, she says. So she goes back to the office and she's got a friend there who's Jewish and she's telling her how to make potato latkes. And they're very in love, still on the honeymoon. Ring, who could that be? It's for you. Something about a rabbi, something about some arrangements? What arrangements? And it turns out his father arranged to have a rabbi do a Jewish wedding for him. And at first, he's not crazy about the idea. But Eileen is like, yeah, let's do it. So he's like, okay, he sets it up for next Sunday afternoon. So she's all happy. They're going to get married again. And they're staying in a borrowed apartment. And they go to tell her parents that that they're going to have a Jewish wedding, and her father's all upset. No, you can't go to that heathen place. But her mother is like, yeah, we'll definitely be there. So they're going through all this stuff, and he goes, be ready an hour early because we got to make a stop. So on the way to their wedding, to their Jewish wedding, he stops at a little church and she goes in and they're like, their parents are there and all her friends are there and they have a Catholic wedding first. And you kiss the bride. Now on to the synagogue. And there it's a solemn ceremony with the incense wafting through, I guess. And they do the ceremony and he says, oh, Rabbi, now you can kiss the bride. So I guess that's supposed to be a contrast in customs. And afterwards they have a big party. And she's like, I like the way I like the way Jewish people do their weddings. And there's another signature. So her father comes up and says, hey, we're going to redo the apartment. We've got a lot of room we don't need. We're going to redo the upstairs so you can have an apartment. And his parents come up and say, oh, we got great news. The neighbors are moving out, so we've got the apartment so you can move in across the hall from us. And they're like, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They're having an argument. And so he says, oh, no, we've already found an apartment way across town. So she's like, what apartment? He says, don't worry, we'll find something. And she's like, actually, I would have liked living in an apartment in my parents' home, or an apartment near his parents. That's the end of this chapter. So finally we have this, another Just Married comic with a Martinez cover. And this is episode 8 of the David and Eileen story. So they've found an apartment, and all the neighbors are kind of put offish, and they haven't made any friends. So she decides, well, I'm going to break the ice, and she starts talking to someone. And they said, well, you know, we said hi to you several times, but you guys were like in a trance. So they've been so in love that they didn't notice their neighbors, and they kind of snubbed them. But, you know, they make it up and they become friends. And they're like, you know, kind of familiar with each other. And they invite him to a party. So they go to a party, and it's kind of like a mixer. So he goes off with the neighbor's girlfriend. I forget his name, Daria or something. And so they're getting really cozy. And the guy is like playing up to her. So they're talking it over, and he said, these people are kind of swingers, I think. He says, yeah, Daria, I wouldn't mind seeing some more of her. She's really built, baby. But not half as good as you, baby, Mrs. Goldman. And he like knocks the brush out of her hand. Very passionate. So they start having their morning coffee together. And so they're at another party, and he sees, you know, the neighbor's wife, she's making out with this other guy. And she's like, wow, you know, Dinah, that's her name, not Daria, Dinah. And if you know, Edgar walks in, you know, he'll be pissed. And sure enough, he walks in, but she's like, oh, a little kiss doesn't mean anything. And she's like, well, you know, if I ever caught David playing around like that, that would be the end of the ball game. So he goes out, and David's kind of all cushy, comfortable with this other girl. And her husband comes up to Eileen and kind of gets her into a corner and tries to make a move on her. And David comes out and sees it, and he gets kind of jealous, and he breaks it up and said, oh, we're going to go. They're like, no, don't go. He's like, yeah, we're getting out of here. So she says, you know, those people are swingers, you know. And he's like, yeah, if he'd actually kissed you, I'd have smacked him one. And she's like, yeah, but you were getting close with Dinah and that other girl. And he's like, well, it's different for men. And she's like, no, it isn't. We're going to be equal or not. So they decide that they're not going to be swingers. Apparently this went for a while, because the editorial board says they were thinking about going just one more issue with this serial, which would have been 9 parts. But if anybody wanted it to keep going, they might consider going on. So right now it's a mystery. Well, I hope you liked this video. A. Martinez, or Julio Cesar Medrano. And if you liked it, be sure and like it. and leave your comments, and I'd like to know what you think. Have a good one. Hello. This is my second video examining a certain artist for Charlton Romance Comics. Today we're looking at Demetrio Sanchez Gomez. This is one of my favorite covers that he did. It's pretty awesome. And this story is called Ring Twice. I'm afraid I didn't read most of these. I just look at the pictures, so it's hard to really narrate what's going on, but you can just look at this beautiful artwork. If you want to, you can read along. It looks to me like Demetrio was influenced by Alex Toth in like this kind of background designs that he used. Toth used that, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe Toth was influenced by by him. I don't know. Good car art. Just really like the ornamentation and the figures and the obligatory swimming scenes. Look at that detail. Very nice. But I guess they're back in the office. And she's taking an airplane trip. And I guess they're happy ever after at the end. A perfect catch. Well, this girl sees this guy kissing another girl, and she decides she wants to be the next one he kisses, I guess. So she gets a job as a secretary. I can always tell Demetrio's artwork by the hair, like this guy's hair. He's got a distinctive style of doing that. So the girl becomes his secretary and kind of rearranges his schedule and makes him really efficient at work. And look at that detail on that. Just great television with what do you call those plants that go along there? So she says he's working too hard, and he wants to take her out, but he wants to take her to New Hampshire to meet her father. So they pile in his car and drive to New Hampshire. He's got I don't know what that is, some kind of a fancy car. And they arrive, and her father looks just like David Letterman, but he runs a little newspaper, and so she's doing his books and writing his checks, and he takes the guy out to the press, and pretty soon they're working on the press and getting it fixed. So they have dinner and talk. And they go out for ice cream. And he says, oh, you should try it. And she's like, well, I'm dieting and you should diet too. So she goes back to the office and he's just working. He's going all over the place. And finally she says, look, I'm going to quit this job. I can't stand to see you. You're not listening to the doctor. And I'm just going to go home and work for my dad. And she goes home, and she gets there, and his dad's like, "Oh, you tell your friend you don't mind if a friend comes to dinner. Who is it?" "Oh, the guy came, and there they are together." I like all this, these little details that he does. Now, I'm pretty sure this is a Demetrio cover. They credit someone else in comics.org, but it looks like Demetrio to me. And this story is called The Love Goddess. It really goes to town on the clothes in this story. It's about a Liz Taylor and Richard Burton type pair of actors, and she's like in this movie with him. Eliza is the girl's name. So he makes it play for her, and his wife goes out and throws a drink on him to kind of cool him down. So she's like, oh man, he loves me. And she's the love goddess, I guess. But this guy tells her, oh, he's just using you to get back at her. They're having a spat. Just kind of digging the art here. And she's like, oh, well, he may go for other girls, but this time is different. And this time he comes riding in on a motorcycle. How does he stay so young? So they go out after they're shooting the set, and so he's doing his lines, some slocky lines, and she's like, oh well, it's getting shorter all the time. Cut. She's like, you gotta let him do this scene, and she's like, oh, let him enjoy himself. I'll break it up whenever I please. So she asked him to a picnic, and this guy, Steve Romano, was angry because, I'm telling you that he's just using you to get back at her. But she doesn't believe him, and she goes out with this older guy, and they're at this beautiful spot with the flowers and the fountain and all. And he's like, well, you're like nobody else I've ever met. Oh yes, but if I leave her, would you come with me? Oh yes, Richard. And then the Romano guy comes and says, hey, they want you back on the set. And she's like, I don't believe the director sent you out here. You're just jealous. He says, that's only part of it, Wendy. So she's not in the next scene, so she decides to go to the beach. And Romano shows up. Oh, you're absolutely gorgeous. And he starts making a play for her, and she's like, I hate this business. I'd like to get married and have children. Just what I want to hear. And she goes right into his arms. I'm sure he loves me. So, you know, they're getting along pretty well, and she's determined to get ahead. So the two stars, they're at a party on this yacht, and they can hear them talking, and they're fighting, they're arguing, and so she goes home, and then you know the movie star comes to her door. Oh, you know, if I divorced my wife, would you run away with me? She's like, oh, I'm not sure. And then he kisses her, and she's like, oh, I'm gonna go with this movie star. But she's not quite sure. This is a great panel. He doesn't have, I don't know, some of the weirdness of other artists, but he's got a great decorative flair. And then someone knocks at the door, and it's Eliza, the movie star's wife. And she's like, oh, if you want Richard, you can have him. You know, come and get him. So she goes, oh, so that she goes to the room and opens the door, and there he is, all bald and spindly looking. And he's like, oh, yeah, how could you do this? So she runs out and goes back to the young guy, and I guess they live happily ever after. This next story is called Bus Ride Blues, and Nick was her fiance, and he threw her over. So she's trying to get over him, and she decides to take a bus trip across the country just to forget about him. So she gets on the bus, and she's all upset. And first they go to Boston, and they get off the bus for sightseeing, and she spots this guy. Oh, who's this guy? He's really cute, but he's with another woman. And so she starts talking to the girl from the next, sitting next to her on the bus. And she says, oh, I would have talked to you, but you seem so sad. She's like, oh, my name's Pam. I guess this trip, has been bumming me out. And so she tells the whole story about her torrid love affair and how it broke up. So next they go to Chicago, and by then they're close friends, and they're walking around the art museums and stuff and checking things out. And then all of a sudden she's walking along, and she spots that guy again in Chicago. He's like, oh, he's with another girl, the same guy. Huh, how could that be? So then they go to San Francisco, and again, it's just, there he is, the same guy with another girl. He's like, oh, I'm kind of in love with this guy, but he must be a two-timer or a three-timer. So she's trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden he comes into the restaurant where she's sitting, and she spots him, and he spots her. So he goes to the hostess and says, oh, is it okay if I sit with this girl? She's like an old friend of mine. And so she says, okay. And so they sit together. And she's like, what are you doing? I saw you in Boston. I saw you in Chicago. And now you followed me here to San Francisco. What's the deal? And he's like, well, I just, it's not what you think. You keep seeing me with other girls, but I'm a salesman, and those women were clients. Oh, is that all? So she's like, oh man, he's all mine. And he's like, well, I know you got your heart set on this bus ride across the country. And she's like, the heck with that. And they get married and live happily ever after, I guess. This one's called A Cause for Love. And we see a guy and a girl in the Greek countryside. And she's like, oh, you know, I'm glad that we're together, but he's about to get arrested. But I'm glad we're together. So she starts out in Dallas. She works for this oil company, and her boss is like, come on, we're going to Greece. And she's like, oh, am I going? He says, yeah, you know, bring the paperwork. And there's some eco crazies that are giving us trouble. So she's like reading this letter. Hey, this guy doesn't sound so crazy. Great urban background there. So they fly to Greece, and he's like, you know, she's doing her work and thinking about this Paul Brandt character. He didn't seem like such a monster, but her boss wants to put a warrant out for him. And they get there, and there he is at Paul Brandt. He's picketing the oil company. She's like, oh, he is a fool. Nice airport art, nice planes, nice cars. I guess that's a European car. Greek car, maybe? I don't know. So they meet and they talk, and she goes back to her hotel, and she's getting ready to go. And he calls her up and says, hey, you know, why don't you meet me? And she's like, well, okay. So they go, and he's talking about this ecology stuff, and you know, your company is gonna ruin the landscape. And she's like, well, I never thought about that before. And you know, she's saying, don't you realize there's an energy crisis? We desperately need more oil. I guess we do, Eve. And he's starting to be swayed by her. And he's like, well, let me take you and show you what's going on. So they go out to get a water taxi, and they go check out the land where they're drilling. And she's like falling for him. Oh, every little detail. Yeah. Great figures drawing. It's Demetrio Sanchez Gomez. So her boss is like, we're going to make a fortune drilling in these islands, and I want you to swear out a complaint on this guy, and see if he comes onto one of our oil leases, we got him, we'll have him arrested. So she's like, oh, you know, I better not let her know that I'm falling for this guy, I'll lose my job. And so she sees him, and he takes her out. I'm going to take you to this place. And it's kind of beautiful, except for the oil derrick in the background. And he's like, she's like, oh, it's beautiful. And he's like, oh, you know, they say that anyone who comes here with a beautiful woman will fall in love. And she's like, oh no, this place is one of our oil leases. They're going to arrest him. And so they're in love. And she's like, well, you know, I hate to do this, but, you know, they're going to arrest you. And he's like, that's okay. That's why I want to be arrested, for the publicity. So the cop comes and arrests the guy. And she's like, I'm with him. You know, we're together. So it's like a big, you know, they arrest him, but they get out the next day. And it's like a big story that the woman that was with the guy who got arrested worked for the oil company. So the guy's like, you're fired, and you can pay your own fare back to the States. And she's like, "No, I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get married." The end. Demetrio. This one has a nice Demetrio cover. And the story is called Sweet Victory. And this girl's in a women's lib club because men always treat women so badly, and so they need to take care of their own lives. So this guy's making a play for her, and she's like, "Look, we've had good times, but you're getting too serious. So that's good. I'm going to break up with you." And so she's got a friend who gets her in. They work in an ad agency, and her friend says, she wants to they want to break through the glass ceiling. So her friend tells the boss, "If you don't give Grace this job as the account executive, every woman that works here will walk out." And he's like, "Well, I know you're qualified, but Tony Briggs is too." And he's like, "No problem, Miss Briggs. Make Briggs Grace's assistant." And the boss, he caves into the pressure, and he says, "Okay, well, Briggs, you're going to be her assistant." And he's like, "Oh, she pushed it over, did she? This should be very interesting." So Grace is his boss, and he's like, "We'll see how long you last. This is a man's job." But the girl, her friend, the woman's liber, she's like, "Oh, that guy, all he has to do is smile and send the girl into orbit." So he starts out as her assistant, and she realizes that he knows a lot more about the ad agency than she does. So he helps her out, and they get their assignments done. And he's like, "Well, I'd quit except for two reasons. One is you need the help, and you've got a terrific figure." "Why you?" And she slams the door. "Conceited, overbearing, chauvinist male idiot." But she thinks about it, and she's like, "Oh, I have a good figure, huh? I didn't think he noticed." So the guy quits the job, and she gets an assistant who's a woman. I like the little vignettes that he does. So this new assistant he gets is no help, and she starts to fall behind in her work. And she's like, "When Tony was here, he always did okay." And so she runs into him, and he's like, "Hey, I got a better job at another agency." And he says, she's telling him, "Oh, well, I'm falling behind in my work." And he's like, "Well, bring it home with you, and I'll come by your apartment, and give you a hand with it." So she's like, "Well, okay." And so he comes over and helps her out. They work for 4 hours, and she says, "Oh, you have such good ideas." And one of his ideas is to move in on her. And woman's lib, I don't even know what that is, darling. So they go out, and they're together all the time. And they fall more in love every time they're together. And then, her friend, the head of the women's lib club, says, "Oh, you're letting us down. You're letting all women down." She's like, "Oh, don't bug me. Just go away. It's women like you that keep us shackled up by men." And but they get married, and she's like, "Heck with that women's lib stuff. This is what I always wanted." But he wants to go to Hawaii on the honeymoon, but she insists they go to Paris. So they go to Paris, and They're having their honeymoon, and drinking champagne, and thinks Olivia's the fool who wants to be liberated from this. The end. This one's called Don't Pity Me. So Mona and Jigs, they're hitting it off really well, and they're getting ready to go somewhere, but she's like, oh no, you're driving too fast. Jigs, look out! Crash! And she's thrown from the car. And then she wakes up. Oh, you know, we were in an accident. You know, where's Jigs? It's like, well, we think he'll survive. He's okay. She's like, my hand is hurt. And he says, yeah, there was a fire, and but you know, your boyfriend got severe burns. Jigs, how do you feel? Not bad, Mona. Are you okay? Is your face scarred up? That's the big thing she's always worried about, is if her face was scarred up. But his eyes are covered. His eyes were burned. So the artwork is kind of okay. Yeah, but he does this elaborate dress just to make sure that he gets his money's worth in there. So the doctor says, you know, we're going to have to wait and see if his eyes heal, and maybe he'll be okay. But he's like thinking, oh, I'm just going to be blind. So he's staying with his married sister, and she takes him over there, and they hit it off. And I don't know what it is with this wild, you know, background wallpaper, but it just makes the pages nice to look at. So, you know, he's going about his business at the ad agency. A lot of ad agencies in these books. And he comes up with the ideas, and she helps him, you know, bring them to fruition. He just, you know, can't leave a blank panel. He's got to keep it really decorated. And his figures are so nice. So she's like, you idiot. I'm here because I'd rather be here than anywhere else in the world. And so they go to the doctor, and he turns out to be okay. And it's all balloons and kisses from then on. The end. And finally, this little number is called They Talk of Love. And there's this girl, Donna, she's in high school, and she's with this bad boy named Troy. And he's just like a real rebel, and he's making moves on her. And like the principal's like, hey, break it up. I said, you know, and he's like, oh, the heck with him. I don't care what he says. Let's go behind the gym. And she's like, I'm not the kind of girl like does that. And he's like, no, you girls are all the same. And so she's like, I don't know about this guy. And so he starts talking about her to his friends, and they're like, oh, you know, we hear you're a loose girl. She's like, I'm not that kind of girl. And so she's talking to this girl, and she's like, oh, you want to go to the Frosty? I guess that's like a teen club or something. She's like, well, you know, maybe, but I got a book report to do. So she walks out there, and sure enough, there's her friend not doing a book report. And everyone's giving her the cold shoulder. And this guy comes up. Hey, I haven't seen you since school, you know, after they kicked me out. She's like, get lost, you know, and he's like, quit acting like that. I've heard about you, baby. And he's like, you know, I'm going to make a move on you. And she's like, that guy's a liar. You know, get away from here. I'll slap your face. And he's like, you try it. You'll be spitting teeth, baby. And this guy steps in, the guy with the Demetrio hair. He steps in and says, try for my teeth, hero. And she chases the guy off. And he's, oh, that was horrible. Haven't seen that guy in years. And so, you know, your ex-boyfriend's been talking about you, you know, and I hate to say the terrible things he's been saying. But he's like, don't worry, I know you're not that kind of girl. Come on, I'll take you home. And she's like, oh, it's nice to meet a good boy. Would you like to come in and meet my mother? So she goes in and says, oh, you know, that Troy has been saying terrible things about me, Mom. And he's like, yeah, you know, your father was so pissed. He was gonna go beat the guy up. You know, I had to talk him out of thrashing the Ellis boy. Don't worry. And he's like, don't worry, I'll talk to him and ask him to knock it off. Nice background, the flowers. So, you know, Wendy calls her up and says, hey, I'm having a party. You know, why don't you come on down? And so she goes to the party, and that guy Troy is there, but she's like, oh, she's going to have to face him. And so he comes up and starts giving her shit. And she's like, oh, I shouldn't have come, Wendy. I'm so sorry. And he's like, Troy is all mouth. It's time for someone to shut him up. And suddenly they hear a fight going on in the other room. And her boyfriend comes in. You don't have to worry about him anymore. And he's got a black eye. And she's like, oh, you got that for me. He got a lot more because of you, Donna. Oh, thank you, Gene. Well, I'll call you when... Oh, no, you don't, Gene. He drops her off, and he's like, well, I'll call you. And she's like, oh, no, you don't, Gene. She says, I'm not the kind of girl that he says I was, but I am the kind of girl that likes to kiss a nice boy goodnight. And so that's the end. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at the work of Demetrio Sanchez Gomez. And if you liked it, like it. And of course, I love reading your comments. And let me know. Follow, like, and all that good stuff. And we'll see you the next time.